Good afternoon all, and welcome to our webinar for November. I'm Alistair Dent. Joining me today to discuss how you can get the most out of your annual planning day is Jonathan Tiefel. Really glad to have you all on board, taking a few minutes out of your day to invest in the future, and we trust we can give you some valuable insight that can help set you up for success in 2018. Got a good number on the call today from all around the country. And it's exciting to see so many business owners that are passionate about improving their businesses. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jonathan and he can take us through what we'll be covering today.
Thanks, Alistair. Well, the annual planning day has been around for a long while now, although it seems to have had a bit of a surge in popularity over the last 5 years or so. And the broad concept is that you take the team away from everyday business operations and spend some quality time brainstorming strategy and planning how you're going to make next year more successful than this year. So whether you call it an annual planning day or a strategy session or even a team alignment day isn't really relevant. The point is that you're taking the time to allow the team, not just yourself but the team, to work on the business rather than in it. So our subject this afternoon is building the future, getting the most out of your annual planning day. So before we begin, a quick run through the agenda for today's session. We'll be looking at the foundation, the things you need to consider prior to your planning day. Next is rules of the game, the guidelines to a well-run day. We'll go over the VSRE model, the structured yet flexible approach to a planning day. Next is how to eat an elephant, where we'll be looking at the key to implementing your strategies. And finally, your New Year's resolutions. So how to avoid falling off the cliff after a successful planning day. And as always, we would value your feedback. So you'll see a feedback form pop up at the completion of the session. If you fill out the form, we'll make the slides from today's webinar available to you. And with that, I'll hand you back over to Alistair.
Thanks, Jonathan. So before we start, we'd like to run a quick poll to get a feel for where our audience is at. So the question is on your screen there. And what describes your experience with an annual planning day in your business? So firstly, we held a planning day last year and we'll do it again. Or perhaps you had one last year but decided not to continue. Or maybe deciding to have your first planning day ever this year. Or alternatively, you don't actually see the need to have a planning day for your business. So the results are coming in. Numbers are bouncing around a little bit. We'll just wait for a few more responses to come in before we close the poll. Mostly encouraging results so far, and we'll finalise that poll very shortly. In fact, we might do that now. And interesting just to see where we ended up. You should see that there on the screen now. And it's come out exactly 3/4 that have actually run planning days or planning sessions before in their business and are planning to do it again. So that's very encouraging to see. And the remaining quarter of the responses indicate that for those that haven't had a planning day, they are actually planning to run one this year. And it's encouraging to see that there's nobody on the call today that doesn't actually see the need for a planning day in their business. So moving right on. To run a successful planning day, you have to get the foundation right. So step number 1 requires that you spend some time actually planning your planning day. So here are the 5 things you need to think about straight up. So 5 points there on your screen. We've got venue, attendees, facilitation, we've got preparation, and then documentation. So firstly, the venue, and this is very important. Where will you hold your day? So at the office or somewhere else? And an off-site location for your planning day isn't 100% critical, but it can add some real value. And in my experience, it not only keeps distractions to a minimum, but it also helps your team get into the right frame of mind. And a change of location Just seems to make people think differently. But if you're going to stick to your office, that's fine too, but it has to be distraction free. So no phone calls, no emails, no people ducking in and out of the meeting room. Otherwise, you will lose the value of your day. Second point, who will attend? And this is a really important one to get right. Obviously, anyone in the management position should be there. That much is straightforward. But apart from that, who else? And varying opinions on this matter, but it's really up to you. I generally like to include more rather than less. Typically adds value to the day, but you need to run it through a filter. And that is these questions. So, will they add value to your day? Will they be an active contributor of ideas? And then will they participate in a robust discussion? And if not, I think you need to do your business a favour and give them the day off. So next point, who is going to run the day? Who will facilitate the session for you? And this is also very important. I would always recommend an external facilitator, so whether it's your business coach or business advisor, perhaps an external board member or somebody else from outside the business. But one of the biggest impacts you can make to the success of your planning day is by having an external facilitator. Because not only will they help keep the day on track, but they'll provide an external viewpoint and perhaps ideas that are not flavoured by any internal factors. And then preparation, as with anything in life, proper preparation is essential. So we all know the 5P approach. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Bit of a tongue twister, but absolutely true. And so make sure you have all the tools and information needed to get the most out of your day. Things like historical sales data and perhaps market research can help when it comes to strategic questions. So that rather than relying on gut feel, you've actually got some numbers and some solid data to go off. Perhaps a questionnaire to the attendees, to the team before the event, so you can uncover any questions or concerns or perhaps any opinions from an individual standpoint. And then ensure you have decent visual aids available, so a projector and a flip chart, plenty of whiteboard real estate and some markers that actually work. Small point, but very important, and speak from experience on that particular point. But you need to prepare well. And then finally, documentation. So you must keep good records of what happens. And the whole team can take their own notes, of course, but somebody should be made responsible for properly documenting the whole day. And this includes taking notes or minutes of the full day, snapping pictures of any whiteboard or flip chart scribbles, and then distributing the documentation through to everyone following the session. And with that, I'll hand back to Jonathan and he can help us out with the next section.
Okay, so rules of the game. So before you begin, there needs to be some basic rules or guidelines set, and it's best to go over these at the start of the day. And this isn't about reading a riot act, it's just setting expectations around what you expect from everyone attending. So firstly, no distractions, because distractions will kill the flow. So phones in the corner or in a box outside, no checking emails, no uninvited visitors, and keep movement in and out to a minimum. Ideas or suggestions are mandatory, so if you want to say something, say it. There's no such thing as a bad idea, at least until the team says so anyway. And before the day starts, you'll be going over objectives that you want to hope you'll achieve out of the day. So remain focused on those and on the broad agenda. Don't get sidetracked into minor or irrelevant issues. You're just wasting the time of a lot of people. Discussion is great, but you have to keep focused. So participation is critical. No passengers or spectators are allowed at your annual planning day. Either join in and add some value or go home. Really, you want to achieve 100% participation. So energy. A full day planning session is hard work. You have to keep the buzz up. If it's heavy going or people start losing interest, take a break, stretch the legs, have a coffee, whatever's required. If all else fails, enforce a regime of star jumps or push-ups. People will soon perk back up. And finally, have fun. Don't forget to have fun. This is a serious event, we know, but make sure it's not some stodgy or corporate event. get the team involved, lighten the atmosphere, tell some jokes if you have to. And with that, I'll hand back to Alistair.
A good planning day will always flow freely without getting bogged down in unnecessary detail and then racing the clock to fit everything in. So where it can get off track, I should say very easily, is by not having a structure to follow. So the real secret to a successful planning day is to have a structured framework, but without being 100% rigid in your approach. So the approach we take in our strategy workshops, I like to call the VSRE model, and that is vision, strategy, resources, and execution. And that's it, just the 4 points. Perhaps more like 4 sections, really. But what this approach will give you is a framework to guide you through your day without constantly disrupting the flow because you have a list of talking points to cover off on the agenda. So instead of an agenda with 50 dot points, I use the framework and just let it flow. Just let it flow. Make sure you stick to the broad sections, but don't jump ahead. But if you stick to the framework, you will get value out of your day. So the first section is vision, and really what we're answering here is the question: where do you want to go? Now, you might already have a vision statement. If you do, chances are that you don't remember what it is. But even if you do remember it, pretty likely it doesn't actually give you the clarity or direction that's required to set your strategy. So planning day is a great opportunity to have another look and bat around your vision. So starting with your broader vision, perhaps a 30,000 foot view, but then bringing it down to more specific objectives. And I find the best way to tease out your vision is through asking great questions and stimulating a discussion. So questions around your target markets and your products and services. So what will we be selling, perhaps to which industries or markets, and then in what geographical locations. What about your position in the market? What size is your market share? Do you know, and do you know what you expect it to be, what you want it to be? So ask the questions, have the discussion, and then challenge the assumptions and the ideas. And even if you think you have your vision clear already, I'm really strong on this point. This is a valuable discussion to have around your vision. And at the end of the first section, your team should be aligned around not only the broader business vision, but more specifically, the vision for the year ahead. So section number 2 is strategy. And this is where you take your vision for the year ahead and look at how to translate that vision into action. In essence, how do we get there? How do we get to where our vision is pointing us? And you'll spend a lot of time in this section, so make sure you get plenty of input from the team in brainstorming new ideas and new approaches. What are the core pillars that are required to implement the vision? What is the growth plan? Where do the sales numbers need to be? Does the product mix need to change, maybe? Are we expanding into additional markets or consolidating existing ones? And you need to ask these questions. And then once you have some numbers and milestones, then you can challenge them. Are you being too conservative or, on the flip side, perhaps too optimistic? So by the end of this section, by the end of the strategy section, you should be able to illustrate your growth plan and what's required in terms of strategic milestones to achieve that vision for the year ahead. So then we move on to resources. We need to look at what resources will be required to execute the strategy. What needs to change? Will you need more staff, more capacity in sales or operations, for instance? Then how about roles and responsibilities? Maybe they need to move around. Or even staff skills. Is further training required? And then we can look at other areas. Cash flow. Will you have the funds required to sustain your growth plan? Maybe premises or plant and equipment. Even technology and systems. What additional or upgraded resource is required in order to execute your strategy? So spending the required time in the resources section will mean that you have a clear picture, a clear picture of what investment is required in your business resources in order for you to execute your vision and your strategy. And so that takes us to the fourth and final section, which is execution. And in my experience, a lot of strategy sessions or planning days fail or fall down because not enough time and effort was devoted to execution. And it's pretty clear that if you don't focus enough on execution, on implementation, if you like, of the strategy, the value of your day will be lost. And you can see that the point there on the screen, and that is that the power of an idea is in its implementation. So once you've come through the strategy and resources sections, you'll be able to identify a broad strategic roadmap. And then the key to execution is to break this down bit by bit. So firstly into broad strategic priorities or milestones, or even quarterly themes, perhaps for the year ahead. So for instance, quarter one might be improving internal systems, and quarter two, and maybe adding sales resource, and quarter three, launching a new business division or something like that. And then out of this, with the help of your whole team, you're then able to identify the individual strategic projects that are required as part of these priorities. So things like hiring new team members, or implementation of a new CRM system or accounting system, maybe consolidation of inventory lines, or whatever the case may be. So once you've identified your list of strategic projects, then we come to prioritisation. And that's not only in terms of importance, but also in terms of your ability to actually implement them. Then you can choose which projects you'll be taking on, leaving any off the list that you aren't confident of executing. At the end of the day, the outcome you're looking for from an execution perspective is a handful of strategic projects assigned as responsibilities to relevant team members and with strict deadlines attached. And Jonathan can take us through the next section for more on this.
So I'd like to follow on with the subject of execution, because this is the area that generally needs the most attention. So the age-old question is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is the same as it's always been, and that's one bite at a time. So what Alistair was speaking about earlier is a demonstration of this, and I'll just like to take the idea a little further. The fact is, things simply don't happen when they remain as broad objectives or large projects unless you break them down into bite-sized chunks. The key here, though, is not to bite off more than you can chew. It's very easy to have Superman complex and take on a whole bunch of big projects, but you need to be realistic. Settle for a few key projects, large rocks if you like, and then you can fill up the jar with further small tasks and quick wins. What typically gives the best results is the concept of a sprint. So whether that's a 90 or 100-day sprint, or even with a shorter time frame, when you have a project set as a sprint, it will have weekly milestones attached that must be met to stay on track for the completion of the project. So then the final step is accountability or follow-through. Typically this is best done in a team environment for maximum accountability. The idea being that on a weekly basis any project sprints are reviewed and the project owner is kept accountable to progress against a milestone set. And accountability is absolutely critical to ensure execution. And with that, I'll hand you back over to Alistair.
So we've spoken about the foundation of your planning day and the preparation that's required, and we've also touched on a structure that you can use to ensure things stay on track. But I want to finish up with what happens after the fact, what happens after your planning day is completed. And you've had your session, it went really well, the team is fired up, you've come up with some great strategies for the new year, things are looking up, things are looking positive. But then the phone starts ringing and your inbox is overflowing, you've got customers to please and fires to fight. So what happens? You lose focus, the team loses interest, and then you're back into the same old. The whirlwind has taken over once again. So we've spoken a lot about execution, and I do just want to continue on this point because it's absolutely key to getting the most out of your day and realisation of the full value. So if you want to get the most out of your annual planning day, you need to work out what you're going to change. What are you actually going to do different this year? So I've got a quote for you. You may have seen it before. It's there on the screen. And as far as I'm concerned, Einstein's greatest contribution, perhaps to modern society, was not the theory of relativity, but his definition of insanity. And there it is, you can read it. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you're going to avoid insanity and start doing different things, there's something that you need to be clear on. And that is this, that what you do not do is as important to your success as what you do. And if you as a business, as a team, as individuals, are going to do some new things, which, by the way, you should, following your planning day, then you need to stop doing the old things, or at least some old things. And I like to talk about a not-to-do list. So work out what you're going to stop doing, once again as a business and perhaps as individuals, and put it on your not-to-do list. So start, stop, keep exercises are a popular and effective way to determine what is going to change, similar to this particular point. But the underlying principle remains, and that is if you want to change the outcome, you've got to change the activities. So don't tinker around the edges, don't act insane, change things up, and you will reap the benefits. So execution, execution, execution.
So what we've learned. So to recap on what we've learned today, we went over the foundation, the things you need to consider prior to your planning day. We went over the rules of the game, so the guidelines of a well-run day. We went over the VSRE model, the structured yet flexible approach to a planning day. We went over how to eat an elephant, where we'll be looking at the key to the implementation of your strategies. And finally, your New Year's resolutions. So how to avoid falling off that cliff after a successful planning day. So before we wrap up, just a quick plug for our Kickstart Strategy workshops. We've been running these for several years now, and we've had great results. And you can see a few client testimonials there on the screen. And just letting your audience know that we have 9 slots remaining over December and January. We've got 3 remaining in December, 6 remaining in January. And if you're interested in this program, simply register your interest in the feedback form and we'll be in touch. And just as for the feedback form, we certainly appreciate your feedback, so please complete the form at the end of the session and we'll make a copy of today's presentation available to you. And once again, many thanks for attending our session today, and we hope to see you again at our webinar next month. Thanks.